Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the T.O.A. podcast. I am your host, Honorable. Greeted here today, once again, by Eck the Elephant. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. A long time no chat.
I know it's been really long.
And we're not talking about the false one we did a couple hours ago.
Yeah, my mic wasn't plugged in properly, so all the audio was destroyed. But don't worry, we're not lazy. Mostly, we're coming back stronger than ever. Maybe, I don't know. We had a couple phrases, so my tongue's a little purple, which is great for me. So with this purple tongue, what should we talk about?
Oh, I had a topic in mind, actually.
Oh, what you got?
I was thinking we could talk about our ways we kind of describe our own MOCs. Because we sort of...
The different MOC tiers.
MOC tiers, levels, layers, however you want to describe it. Yes, tiers is a good one.
I think we might have briefly mentioned this in another podcast, but we're actually going to go a little bit more in depth about this. Which, may as well start from the bottom.
Well, yes, at the very bottom of our MOCing, basically we have mask swaps. A Tohunga with a different mask.
Mask swap Tohunga, even a Madamatoran, a Metromatoran with a different mask. Where they are technically mocked, because I have a mock of a Matoran Vakama, a Matoran no Kama.
Sometimes you have to swap out the hand sockets or legs, so it's just color swapping is all it is.
Yeah, pretty much color. You're not designing something, you're just
taking a pre-existing set and giving it a different shaped mask and some different colors.
Now, with Tohunga, whether those count as mocks or not, whether these count as mocks is debatable.
It's not a set, but it's not really a mock either. It's not my own creation. It's just a creation.
It's just a thing that exists. And pretty much, I think we don't really ever do that with Matoran.
Yeah.
Pretty much. We don't really make mocks in that vein for the most part.
Yeah, it's basically just to make our Matoran population very large.
That isn't all the same. It's pretty much as if you grab minifigs in system and swap out the heads.
Or headgear.
Is it a different minifig from the set? Did you make up a native fig?
Yeah, it's when you buy 100 different Blacktron minifigs and you're like, I have 100 Blacktrons, but I want to actually differentiate them, so I'm just going to swap with their heads.
Yeah, it's kind of
along those lines. Very simple, very basic, and sometimes you get attached to the characters that you make, even if there's just a Nipu with a Huna.
Exactly. So, next level above that starts coming to with limb swapping.
You want a little bit more than just swapping off a mask. You're swapping colors. You're actually building something from scratch.
Pretty much, you're not designing it yourself. You're still using, let's say, the Unica build and making different characters. You grab Unica, but instead you're using, let's say you grab Buki, but you give him metallic black upper limbs. You change up the mask, maybe change the feet and such. It's a step above color swapping. You're just building stuff using the same sort of palette.
You're not being inventive at all. These are the same level of quality of sets, or sometimes below, because they don't really flow as nicely.
Yeah, you pretty much just got Glatorian sets almost at this point, or just
you might have some little interesting tidbit, but they're standard limbs, standard arms, standard feet, standard torso.
You're not making your own limbs.
You're not designing anything.
I find one step above that. What we started doing was making our own heads, because when we didn't have enough masks in bunch pieces, we would have to make our own heads. So
we had to get all these loose lots. Always the mask was missing, it seems. And you get one or two masks. We got plenty of body parts. So
limbs were fine.
We had unless we had odd numbers. There's a lot of peg legs, one-armed people.
Which I guess would be tier 3 would be peg legs, hooks, and alien heads essentially.
Yeah, that would be the next tier because you're taking their standard Unica build and just slightly modifying it.
Mostly because we didn't have the parts.
You're using some other different piece for armor that's not standard because you didn't have the normal standard armor pieces.
Yeah, but again, you're also not.
Like the hockey shoes. You're starting to use those as armor.
But you still have basically the standard builds, it's a mainframe. Your mainframe hasn't changed.
Yeah, your mainframe still took you 5 seconds to put together.
Yeah, this is kind of the point where we were for the most part when we first started making made-ups and actually had extra parts to do it. Because we didn't have, full sets, so we just had loose parts we put together.
Yeah.
We didn't have extra technique to do anything interesting.
Because we have our Bonkle set collection, our Bonkle parts collection. This is when our Bonkle parts collection was just starting.
Yeah,
the early years.
Our set collections were incomplete at that point, but yeah, we would get some stuff from a bunch of pieces. My first made-ups were pretty much just unique new Peru builds with a few extra stuff added to them. They had puts on attached to their shoulders. Their bodies had a few parts added to fill up, and a few stuff added to their legs. So they weren't they were still a unique build with just stuff added on to them to bulk them up.
And that was Yeah, that was more of a
filled in their arms
modified
a little bit.
set. It's kind of going off like another branch, but it's a very low branch.
This is a branch
You're taking a set and just tacking onto it. That's almost a lower class unlock because it's less inventive.
Now, in fairness, those ones have evolved further than that now.
Yeah, some of those guys still exist.
No. My first mock, Defron, is still around, and he's still pretty much the same. But that's because of how that species of characters look. It's too important for them. I can't just change it. So
exactly,
it is how it is. Moving up from that is when you start to, I'd say, have different made-up bodies. I think was like the first.
Yeah, that was the first step up. We started actually constructing our own bodies instead of just grabbing that Inika torso and slapping it on there and calling it done. Like, no, we actually extend the body, make it a little thicker, or actually.
I think it's usually started with extending the bodies taller, and or using different stuff to fill up the chest. You would have the unique shoulder blade piece, then a hip piece, but all the armor covering it up would be different first. So you would actually create more or less made-up body.
A lot of that probably stemmed from some of the lots we got. You'd get the body, you'd get the hip piece, but you wouldn't actually get the armor to cover it.
Yeah, there was a few of those, definitely.
And there was a point where we just actually wanted to go for a different look.
Well, a lot of times, I think the first time we really started doing is when we want to use the hockey chest armor piece on bodies.
Yeah,
I feel like that's kind of one of the early... That or T.O.A. body armor. Those are the two that
or the two in conjunction.
Yes.
Those don't float. Yes. Those two pieces don't float that well together, though.
They look like they should, but they don't.
It's just they literally don't fit. It's just the curves in the wrong spot. But yes, the hockey body, those hockey armor, because we got loose hockey parts in our early.
Just trying to use a hockey body as a body.
That was one of my earliest characters, BWB.
Yes.
He doesn't have that hockey body anymore. I essentially modified him so he didn't, but he still looks the same. Just he's not sitting in a chair.
Yeah, but the thing is, a lot of this still came down to basically just much we didn't have the parts to deal with. But the body's we did start wanting to do something a little bit different. Usually we wanted to get a different chest look. Was usually the
It was kind of the extent the collection could allow as well.
Yeah. And then the next step up from that, I would say, usually was changing upper limbs. Just upper legs was usually kind of the next step up.
Yes. You're starting to expand outwards. Starting to get more custom-looking limbs.
Because, the thing is, a lot of this was, larger mocks, also, Titans. A lot of the set Titans, you look at T.O.A, his arms are all just standard. His lower legs are standard. It's pretty much his body and his upper legs.
Upper legs.
So when we started making larger guys, pretty much the upper legs were the first things to be,
beefened up.
Yeah, because a lot of times the standard Unica leg wasn't quite long enough for what we needed.
Plus, we saw that what could be done.
It was pretty feasible to do. Get a couple of Borak heads or Borak bodies, a couple sockets, something to cover it up, and boom, we got an upper leg.
Another is just when you're building larger things and you didn't have much armor to work with.
Borak bodies.
You sometimes had to use those Boraks. Got a lot of mileage out of Borak parts in those days.
So pretty much at this point we have part swap, or mask swap. Then it was mask swap, body swap. Made up Unica builds, or standard builds, mildly modified set builds, so peg legs, heads, maybe a hand or something, and now we've gone to the point of basically custom body parts, not full body parts or anything, but either torso here, legs there, maybe both, but they're still...
As the tiers go up...
But I would say the next tier is, the tier we're kind of on right now is kind of the set Titan tier.
Yes.
Where they're getting more creative. We're designing your own parts in person, but there is still a lot of standard
legs.
The legs are the same. The feet are probably the same. Maybe a couple pieces added to them.
No, I think
sometimes, but for the most part, the feet are probably still the same. The lower arms are definitely the same.
Yeah, lower arms, even the
Let's be honest. Lower arms, I think, are usually the last thing that ended up changing. Because even with really big mocks, you can get away with normal lower arms.
Yeah, and they're usually the right size already. And it's there's no point in making something else up when this piece works.
Unless you're using Hero Factory for the upper arm, then you kind of have to do something.
Yeah, it gets a bit tricky.
As I say, I'm looking.
Or you're just trying to
You want to use a certain piece. Pretty much after the Titan style build, that's when you get to full.
Sometimes you just try to challenge yourself to actually do something.
I would say once there's the Titan augmented body parts, Then you get to the actual full top tier MOCs of
we didn't use any limbs anywhere. Maybe in their body.
There might be a limb in somewhere, but it's like you look at it and you don't.
It's not in a standard use. It's not like just a limb slap and you're done. No, it's
pretty much.
modified.
If the size of the MOC is Titan size, but the parts count's like 3 times higher,
or 4 times higher.
That's usually you can tell when it becomes more of a MOC is when the parts count, and when you start filling up gaps in like the upper legs and the body doesn't have gaps.
Well, you pick up a Titan. Then you pick up one of your MOCs that's roughly the same size. And your MOC's going to be like a lot heavier because it's so much denser.
There is a very distinctive difference between them.
It's the amount of just little Technic pieces used usually.
It's funny because Onfmel's gone through almost all of these stages.
Well, of course.
Because his very first model was just a T.O.A. build with different colors.
I'd say he skipped the first stage.
Yeah, he skipped the mask swap. The mask swap would have been a newer with a purple Picari. That would have been the first stage. I never did that. I went to
It's not too late.
But I did do basically a color swap, part swap. Just a
it's a T.O.A. build.
A part masher, I'm gonna call it.
Part masher. Yes.
Part masher. So he went through that stage, and then he went to the point where I gave him custom arms to get elbows, or no, his legs were first. I gave him proper knees in his legs. So he was still pretty much a T.O.A. body, but legs, and then his arms got elbows. So he was still kind of just a augmented set at that point.
His limbs were all.
And then I kind of went down the route of actual full scale MOC. He never had the Titan level because of how small he is. He never had that essentially Titan phase where he had.
Well, I think it's because his limbs got upgraded before his body did.
Yeah.
So he was a little bit backwards.
He kind of hit, but then he went straight into being a full MOC. Where at the moment now, he doesn't have any standard limbs in him. He did for a little bit have his lower arms are Hero Factory for a little while, but he doesn't have those anymore. His body, there is a body piece. There's a half a throwback body in there. He's mostly made up of socket and balls with Technic. That's pretty much what makes him up.
He doesn't even have a normal hip piece.
Nope. Theory could get away with a Baki hip piece, but it'd be kind of weird. But again, his feet though are normal feet. They're Nata feet.
Well, they've got some pieces stuck.
They have fair few pieces on them, so
they're not. They use normal feet, but they're not.
That's actually the thing is you look at all of our oldest MOCs. Usually you can see a general progression of this sort of
And that's the thing because, well, in your case, your oldest MOC, my oldest MOC, they're still built.
But they're still pretty much just.
I mean, my oldest MOC was a Roshki that I made out of a spare Makuta.
Or wasn't Vlad technically?
No, Vlad was made out of the leftovers of that.
Right. So another thing about Ed though is that the Roshi, he was more custom built when you first had him. Because he was built out of Makuta, you didn't have all the parts, so you had to make them.
But now he's more original than Vlad is. Because Vlad, the only thing that's still original is probably his mask.
And I believe the gun piece.
Actually, the mask wasn't even part of it. Well, it was. Because briefly, when I first built Ed, the Roshki, he had Makuta's mask.
I think it's when you took that mask off, that's when you built Vlad.
It's when I took the Hydruka apart.
That's when Vlad was built.
And that's when Vlad was built.
Because I think the Zamra launcher from the Hydruka is still Vlad's.
100%.
That and his mask are probably the only two things that are still his.
Possibly the one with the claws on his hand came from Hydruka still.
It's funny, Vlad went from being a...
There might be a bushing.
Vlad essentially went from being a custom T.O.A. build.
Yeah, he was in
the large... stage 2 almost, stage 3 MOC, technically.
He was in a large T.O.A. It was still a T.O.A. style, but it wasn't exactly a straight up T.O.A. build.
No, he had I think slightly bigger body parts because he had
metallic. Well, those L-shaped pieces, I used the larger ones.
3x5 lift arms. So he was pretty much like a stage 2 going on to stage 3 MOC of part bashing and basically just taking a set design and recovering it in your own way. But he's doing it from scratch.
Now he's basically kind of a T.O.A. build with...
He's kind of what Onvermel was in his middle stages.
Yeah.
Well, his legs were directly designed after Onvermel's.
Exactly. So yeah, he's a middle stage MOC and he's still around. Whereas Ed the Roshki got... Downgraded to a more normal Roshki, but he's still sitting in that canister, still built.
He still has the custom spine, though.
Yep, the Elix spine.
So he is more than just a kit bashing. He's a level above part bashing. But only barely.
It's barely. It's like that first step, but it's still a step on the staircase.
It is a step. There is a custom design in there. So, but it's funny because those older MOCs really haven't changed, and Defron, as we were saying earlier, hasn't changed. It's weird. The oldest MOCs haven't changed, but MOCs that came after them that are still around have probably changed more.
Some of them have changed more, some of them haven't.
Such as the Kurok.
But some of them have changed like very little, like some of our Uda Hops.
Well, yes, those guys. Well, their whole thing is that they're supposed to be just that. One thing that yours that did change over the years was the sniff racks.
Yes, the sniff racks. He went from, well, his very first build was a
custom build. It was a custom build.
It was a custom build because I had 2 Vizirac to work with. And I built
low
something
tier custom. It wasn't a set. It was above anything that's like the set design.
Well, when you're trying to build a bipedal figure out of 2 Vizirac hunks, it's actually a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Because that's all I had at the time, because I bought those parts from Value Village and was visiting you back when you lived at home. So I just built those 2 things, and when I got back, I actually
fixed them up. I think that's when you got his feet properly done.
Yeah, there's a word I'm looking for, but I can't finish. Yeah, made him look better. No, not revamped.
Touched up.
Touched up. That's more what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's funny, but like
refined. That's the word. I refined him.
He hasn't changed terribly much, but he's been
he did go through
he's been smoothened out.
He did go through a upgrade at one point. Just
But he still pretty much has the same body and limbs. He hasn't really changed those.
No, he's just been added on to.
But weirdly enough, the thing because his body's custom and he's up on his limbs. He's a step above just like a custom set. I'm gonna call him.
He'd be a step above because his body's custom, but his limbs are still standard basic.
He's pretty much on the level of like a Titan for customization.
At this point, yeah.
He's around that.
His limbs have had a bit of.
For me, I think my oldest one is an Ongrenal that's had the most changes to him. Well, is probably Zakurok and Prime, but Prime's a weird case. So Zakurok was like the Fron. Yeah, a Nika body with a few add-ons. But because he was charging armor, I needed to make him bigger. So he went from basically being a custom set to full-fledged low-tier custom Titan, where his lower legs, his lower arms, his upper arms, it was mostly his body that was redone, and I think his upper legs. And eventually he's at the point where I think all his limbs, and I think the only thing that...
He might still have some standard limbs.
I don't know if he actually has any standard limbs. I know his legs aren't. His lower arms might be, but I don't think they are. I don't know, actually. It's been a while since I've seen his Zakurok, but he's been through a lot, and he's kind of gone to officially being a MOC. Although the MOC of mine, I think that's had the most changes, who's been around a while, but there's always been it hasn't changed his style of MOC, is someone named Prime. Prime has had, been around as long as Zakurok, because if I'm correct, his original body was basically he had 2 hockey bodies for his lower legs, basically he was a Keytorn's proc body with upper limbs, but all his lower limbs were either a disc launcher for one arm, 2 hockey bodies for his lower legs / feet, and he had a metric head with a Procus canister face strapped onto it, and that body got upgraded to actually having limbs and being basically primary colors, but he was just a skinny little guy with no arm. He was a standard build still pretty much at this point, and then I bulked him up, and he's been built ever since, but he's still just essentially a standard Unica body with a lot of add-ons. He's a glorified Unica body.
Yes, this is like a branch off our tree. We're going up with the levels, but sometimes you have to branch off.
If you bury up the Unica body enough, you can't tell as a standard MOC. Now, there will be something. Sometimes...
Of course, there are different levels of their MOCs, because just because you built all the limbs yourself, you built the body, doesn't mean it's a good MOC.
Oh, no, definitely not. I don't know... Our old Titans were pretty good examples of that, I'd say. I would say Bracken's original...
Well, yes, I look at Bracken now, look at Bracken original. That original Bracken was pretty rough.
They're both fully Titan MOCs, though.
Yeah, they definitely have the same amount of, standard limb usages, but... That older one, yeah, he's pretty rough.
There's a part of me where...
And, just reusing axe on hands, yeah, that's cheating.
There is a part of me that kind of feels like I feel bad when I don't use any standard, parts on a MOC, because I feel like, I'm too good to use regular parts now, but sometimes it's just the colors, there isn't anything. Because when I built an Otaka a few days ago, and yeah, he doesn't really have any standard limbs. He has a couple of Hero Factor limbs for his upper arms, And that's pretty much about it.
Well, he uses a bunch of limbs, just not as limbs. Like all those.
I mean, his feet are standard.
All those upper limbs in dark green, he's got them all over. They're just
them.
not used in a normal sense.
I mean, although his body kind of is pretty standard because he's got a unique body for his back. He's got standard hips. He's got a standard chest plate. It's just not.
Well, if there's one thing that really should stay standard, it's the hip piece. Just because when you use balls half the time,
the only time I generally need to do a fake, a custom hip piece is really with my T.O.A.
Yeah, unless you want to get your hips like smaller or wider, and wider's not very common.
Yeah, Karzani proved why you don't do that. The only time I've done wider hips was with Dentar, and he used Karzani's hips.
Well, when you have a 2-foot tall guy, it's a little bit different.
So, no, there's like, and definitely I would say looking at my attack, he's definitely, I would say, the epitome of how my MOCs have come to be. Whereas, like, what I like about him is that he uses, he's not just fully technic, because his lower legs are feet, and upper legs.
and Nuva armor.
And a Nuva armor. They're pretty much a lot of Bonkle parts with technic keeping them together. His upper legs are Vezon heads with a foot, a hip piece, and sockets.
Well, when you get to your top tier of MOCing, there's kind of the sub tiers. There's good looking MOC, but then there's like good looking MOC with interesting part usage.
Yeah, I mean, even then, so
like you've got these pile of parts that you don't use very often because they're hard to work with, but when you get them to work, it usually looks pretty good.
Well, one thing that I would say is using your own Bracken's chair. It's a pretty good MOC actually, but it's mostly just
It's made out of like Roshki limbs, Vaki upper legs, and some technic to lash it all together with a couple of Rubus.
And it actually works pretty good. Like it's a good MOC, I'd say. Yeah, no, it's like there's definitely levels of MOCs, and like these days I don't do like the lower tiers much unless I'm just building. I did do basically modified sets with T.O.A. Doom and his team because they're pretty much just standard Metro builds with slightly like a few add-on. Like their limbs are all standard.
Well, didn't you like change their shoulders?
They have balls and sockets in their shoulders, but their upper arms are still the same upper arm piece.
Yeah, like it hardly changes.
They're pretty much the same level as the Fron. They're just modified sets. They're well made, color coordinated, and everything, but they're not using like crazy upper technical limbs or anything like that. Or
no, it's something anyone can design.
Even paint, they don't, I think, use any.
Yeah, that's going off a whole nother branch, just painting parts. I have a white white Vaki leg and a black Vaki leg. I could get 2 black ones.
I think we did do a podcast where we were talking about dumb stuff we did, and all the painting we definitely talked about.
We definitely did that.
We were so short on so many parts that, like, especially black parts.
All those loose lots again, we would so often just get one of this, one of that.
We have a lot of black painted pieces. Because black was the only one you could get away with, and we always wanted black.
It was also just the color that matched the best.
Yeah, we did sometimes paint stuff in brown. Was probably the next
the brown. Reality is like dark red would have looked good, but it seems we never needed more dark red.
No, dark red was always enough. It was like
we always had matching pairs.
Dark red and dark green were pretty much like the two things. Dark blue we just didn't care about.
Yeah, we didn't seem to have much of that either, but we didn't.
I still don't build with dark blue. Like I think I've only built one thing dark blue last one. That was like I built a Kitongu species person for one of my locations. I built him, and it was like, all right, this is cool.
Yeah, dark blue's not one of my favorite colors.
It works with very few colors. Like it works great with white.
Yeah, especially.
Key orange, it doesn't look bad, but I think key orange needs to be the dominant color. I think dark blue works best as like goes with other colors. Like it doesn't look bad with dark red. Dark red's the dominant color. It's weird. In system, I love dark blue as a piece, like in a color. It looks great, but in
Monocle, it's quite nice.
It's just. I think because Bonkles is so textured and detailed, like you don't get a nice flat dark blue surface. Like if there's dark blue Hero Factory armor, like larger dark blue Hero Factory armor, I think that would look really, really good. Like if you had that chest piece in dark blue, I think that would look amazing.
Alas, it does not exist.
Yeah. So, but there's definitely to be said with one thing I still don't do very often though with MOCs, like with different tiers, is making made of heads.
Yeah.
I generally keep my scale to the size that they can still use a mask, and I don't usually like making made of heads.
98% of my MOCs just use the standard mask. Actually, probably not that many. I've got all my Raxes. So it's like 95. But that was the case if I had just 2 Vizirac, this aforementioned
And
sniffer
also,
axe.
building axes back in the day was easy because we had a lot of limbs and not a lot of heads. And
You
our
didn't
axes were
need to use the mask or a head.
the only problem they used to resurrect feet or blocky butts, which was
Sometimes you could get away with using one blocky butt, one
we tried to
Metro butt.
avoid that.
But yeah, it just didn't look right.
No, not at all.
I mean, they did tend to use like some extra limbs and
Also, one thing that really says how we have become rich in our Bonko collection to the point where we were saying that we didn't have a lot of masks and we would have to make them made of heads.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at two MOCs over there where they both have heads like masks for lower legs, armor, shoulder armor.
That has definitely become much more prevalent.
Every Bonko builder at some point will discover using masks and or face for shoulders.
Zacta especially likes to do that, I'd say. If he has two of them, he will try to do it.
Zacta definitely does it the most, I'd say, yes.
I usually only do it when it suits the purpose of the MOC, but for the most part, I don't really like to do it because I basically just see a face on the person's shoulder.
On one case I know where you did it was your Dark Callan version of him because, well, my Dark Callan has masks on his shoulder, which is based on because Callan had masks on his shoulder, so having him and also being Ruru's.
Yes, there was definitely some good fact reasoning for why he had
For me, I don't really care if they're masks or not. There's certain masks I won't use, because some masks don't look good for shoulders. I generally don't like to use them, because if it's a face, I'm going to see a face, but at the same time, it doesn't bother me. I just if it works, it works. If not, it doesn't care. My biggest problem is a lot of times if I use them, that's using up two nice masks. So I'm like, okay, is this going to bother? One thing I'll try pretty much never to use 2001 masks, just because the connection is not very great.
Yeah, just because they don't have actual connection.
I think 3 MOCs, 2 or 3 that actually use them for shoulders. One is a T.O.A. Decron, where he's got a couple of mirrors on his shoulders. Those are held on by elastic bands. They look great, and they sit on, because you have green elastic bands, they actually fit on very good. And the stud part cradles into the Roxy upper leg really nicely. But it's kind of an illegal technique because
elastic band.
Technically, they're stressing the masks a little bit, and it's just nothing's actually connected. And then Prime, as I mentioned earlier, has a couple of Cow Nuvos on his shoulders, just attached by the stud part, and let's just say those fall off every time.
Yes.
I think I have one other person maybe with those. I think my big blue guy, Hey, I think, has them. I know his name's Hey because that's the rough manual translation to chicken, if I'm correct, because
you also have one that uses Rurus. They're not as shoulders or anything.
Oh, yes, I have Zenon, who has a couple trans blue Rurus for her bust.
I also
Those stay on really good. Wait, that also reminds me, I have a couple Picars used as a bust on a Makuta. Whatever her name is, I don't have a name for her yet.
Waspex. Makuta Waspex.
I don't know if those stay on well because I've gone a lot more. Because they're attached to the chest and they're attached to balls. Balls are designed to attach to studs.
More than they were.
Which is why I think when you attach.
Well, I think they were just literally designed to attach to both.
Well, yes, they were. Which kind of sucks for.
The axle connection really suffered in the early balls.
Yeah, so it's because of that, both those female figures who have mats attached to balls on sockets, the balls have a better connection. And because they're on the chest, those aren't an arm shoulder piece where they get knocked off.
I've used mask as bust in 2 different cases. It's the same character. Because Lady Bracken.
And then other Lady Bracken.
One of them uses Rurus, the other one uses Great Rouse.
So the Great Rouse actually have axles.
I've also used Rurus as shoulders on Talon, the Fire Seer.
Yes.
And basically as part of the chest. Not as, feminine, obviously.
They were just used as a chest.
And it's still a feminine figure, but it's not really...
They weren't intended to be boobs, they were just intended to be the chest. If that makes sense to people. I'm sure it makes sense.
Actually, I don't have... I've only got the one picture. It's kind of in the background. I haven't taken
she hasn't ended up on your Flickr stream yet.
No, she's one of the last 2 or 3. I feel like only 2 or 3 left.
Also, one standard in builds, I would say that came out with the level above glorified Unica builds when we started getting fingers.
We looked at Hydraxin and said,
yeah,
we can do
biggest thing, we just didn't have a lot of spare extras, so we didn't use them much. Now we have a lot more.
We use them sparingly.
The only problem with giving someone fingers makes it hard to hold weapons, so that's kind of a trade-off.
So there's always this awkward you either have to not have them attached and hold the weapon, which is often what I think Zach has.
Zach has gone to the point where, well, he just has them on display, so he's fine with not attaching weapons. Me,
or you have to have some slight awkward.
I have like this. I am so annoyed when a mock can't physically hold. I want to be able to pick up my mock from any point in the body and pick it all in one go. It's the same reason why I don't like spinners on mocks, because they just fall off.
Yeah, I'm kind of more in that boat. I like to have the weapon attached to them.
The only mock I think that couldn't actually attach their weapon was Dentar, but he was big enough that his fixed hands could actually hold it.
The tires in it really helped.
Yeah, so
that was a different case.
That was a very different case. Like I said, I have a personal affinity towards making sure my mouse can hold weapons, which is annoying because certain hand designs don't lend themselves to that very well.
Some hand designs, though, can really help with opposing, especially because that new pin axle.
The problem with that is, though, you can't really make a fist.
Yeah.
So if they're not holding a weapon, it's kind of annoying.
There is no perfect hand for your standard normal size.
For standard, no. Once you get a little bit bigger, things get way different.
Like the Matanui, the Titan Matanui hand.
It's not bad.
That's a very nice hand, and I've basically taken that sort of style and used for Bracken. But it only works with your really big mocks.
My favorite style of hand I ever made was I made for my Makuta mock, because he's actually got 4 fingers, a thumb. It's not too large size. He can hold stuff. He can make a fist. It's posable.
Yes.
If you look through the channel, they'll see a video basically of at Stay at Home for a Con or something like that, and he is in there. So if you guys want to take a look there, I'm not going to show you a picture because I'm too lazy for that.
But still, that has to be on definitely more larger mocks. You can't use it for like an Inika size.
Pretty much Inika size, like you have to use a standard socket with pretty much like
Hydraxon style.
Hydraxon with hands, pretty much, are about most you can get. And even then,
sometimes the Glatorian fist works nicely.
But the thing is, though, sometimes with adding fingers to a hand that elongates the arm, it makes it look more lanky.
Yeah.
So sometimes I have been like, you know what, the Glatorian fist works better just because it isn't as long as giving some actual fingers.
And sometimes even then the Glatorian fist still looks too long, so you have to just give him a standard socket.
That's a rare case, but that means they always have to have really lengthy
arms. Sometimes, though, you just look at the socket like, that's just the hand I want. That's all the hand he needs. True.
My Urapin have that for the most part. But
it's just something classic.
Yes. I think it was interesting delve down. I'll say this, if anyone listening is really confused by all this, I'm sorry, but Bonkles fans will probably understand this, which is what my audience is targeted towards, so this is going to be fine.
If you're not a Bonkles fan, why are you listening?
Yeah, why are you here? So, yeah. I've been your host, Mel. This has been the T.O.A. Podcast, and we are retiring from the night.